That's what I, you know. It's good. I like that. Well, thank you. You know, thank everybody else. I mostly just stand up here. Everybody else is the ones who built it. But we are very proud of it. Yeah, stand up comic. I decided this year I would spare you from the terrible jokes I told last year. Those were awful. But what is? I will explain. You'll ask that question when we begin. That's a good question to ask, for sure. All right.
Well, there's two ways of dressing. There's dressing down or dressing up.
Oh, wow, you're looking fabulous.
He wants to be comfortable. I'm just, you know. I get it.
Is that a wedding outfit?
No. So this tuxedo I wore in college, and it was my barbershop quartet. So, you know, there's 3 other guys with the exact same thing. One of our quartet members' mom actually made this part here. We got the rest of this outside of it, and yeah, why not?
You know, next high holidays, your first high holidays, your new job. That's the one to go with for sure.
That would be a choice.
You know, that would be a choice. That would be a choice. I appreciate your diplomatic view of things. That's also true. We could do a Temptations review before you leave. That would be great. Yeah. I love me some Motown, that's for sure.
I'm with you.
All right.
Plenty of good music out there.
Oh, okay. We're a little low key on our Havdalah set at the moment. We couldn't find the full package, so we're kind of pulled it together from a few different things. Okay. Well, you got all quiet and all serious all of a sudden. You know,
everyone's ready to start.
Yeah, I mentioned the high holidays, and you took me too seriously. It's the outfits. I know it's an overwhelming amount of color. I hear you. I hear that. Yes, well, you know, all that for sure. Oh yeah, by the way, Grogger's very important. Here, we'll make sure everybody has a Grogger.
We got to practice that too before we start.
Yes, that's also true. Booing doesn't come so naturally to this crowd.
You guys are too chipper.
Really, thank you very much.
Some of them don't work as well as others. Yeah, maybe move the other way around. Yeah, that might be easier.
Mine works.
saw the Barbie movie is the essential part of this. So I have a Knuff thing, and then I made it a little more delicious. I just love the idea that my afternoon was filled with cutting out a piece of the knish. It's like Google image searching for knish is definitely a highlight. Well, Chag Sameach, everyone.
Chag Sameach.
I'm like, yes,
that might help.
Yours is on, yours is not on. How's everybody doing? Good. Just good. I see that. We're going to work on that. We're going to make it better. And I know you're all excited about Indian food, but we have an important thing to do before we get to the Seudah, to the celebration. And that's celebrate this beautiful tradition of reading the Megillah. I don't suppose many of you brought your Megillah from home. No, don't worry.
You guys left it at home?
I think that tendency is gone. And the challenge, of course, is that I couldn't find our printed copy so easily. I have 2 of them, but I made it as easy as I could think to help people find the digital version on your phone. So this will be the only time where I'm going to tell you that you can use your phone to read the Megillah. We're putting the cart before the Megillah, so we'll get that. Wait, who asked the question though before? Jackie, what was your question? What the word Megillah means? The expression of the whole Megillah.
The whole Megillah.
So the origin of that is anybody who's actually sat through the entire reading of the Megillah. That is probably the entire point. But this here is our temple's Megillah. I have no idea of its provenance. If anybody knows, Carl, perhaps you know where it came from. But it, as you can see, a little bit weathered from the storm, as it were. But actually, the Megillah, unlike a Torah scroll, and the word, just to be clear, the word Megillah, is the word for scroll. So technically, Torah is a Megillah. And that's why if you want to learn about the Torah, you open up the section of the Talmud that is called Megillah, not Torah. And inside of that are all the descriptions about what it takes to have a Torah, what makes it kosher, and so on. Now, there's another interesting thing. I don't know if you know this. So, of course, the tradition with a scroll usually is when you want to move it forward or backwards, what do? Roll it, right? Megillah scrolls, actually, the tradition is to fold them, which is a little bit different than everything else, which is why you'll see this one looks a little bit funkier than most. So there was a long time where families would have their own family Megillah, and they'd bring it to synagogue, and everybody would share from it in that way. But don't worry, again, I'm not expecting any of you to have that experience. And if nothing else, you'll get to listen to Cantor Kevin chant some beautiful sections of the text itself. I'll summarize some of it. I'll read some of it. A lot of great stuff. But before we get to any of that, we're going to end Shabbat and help us to usher in this Chag by doing Havdalah. So can I ask a favor? Max, can you do me a favor? Go back to the back of the room. There are some light switches behind you. 1 or 2 of them should bring down some of the lights. Try the bottom row first. Let's see what we got here. Keep going. Nah. There, 1 more maybe. Try up above. Okay, good enough. We'll go with that. Now, Cantor, if everybody wants to follow along, we're on what page in the prayer book?
Starting on 610 and going directly into 612.
Okay, so if Havdalah is not familiar to you, it's what we do whenever, not just the end of Shabbat, but whenever we are ending any kind of sacred time in the beginning of another one. So even in a circumstance where you have, for example, Shabbat ends and another holiday immediately begins, you still do Havdalah, but you take out certain elements of it. So in this case, we're doing everything. And Cantor, I'll do the opening part, and then everybody can join together.
That's perfect.
Okay. Now,
because I need to find one more thing.
First step here. הנה אל ישועתי אפתח ולא אפחד, כי הזי בזמרת אדוני ויהי לי לישועה, ושאבתם מים מששון ממעייני הישועה. אדוני ישועה, עמך ברכתך סלע, אדוני צבאות עמנו, משכב לנו אל יעקב סלע, אדוני צבאות אשרי אדם בוטח בך, Adonai Hoshia HaMelech Yanenu B'Yom Korenu LaYehudim Haita Ora B'Simcha B'Sason B'Ikar Ken Tieh Lanu Kos Yeshua Desam U'B'Shem Adonai Ekram. Now let's everybody rise. We're on page 612 and we'll follow Cantor Kevin.
Yai lai ya la 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 lai lai yai lai ya la 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 lai lai ya la lai lai yai lai ya la lai lai ya la lai yai lai ya la 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 lai lai yai lai ya la 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 lai lai ya la la lai 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei hagafen borei peri hagafen Yai-dai, yada-da-da-dai, yai-dai, yada-da-da-dai, yada-dai, 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 yada-dai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei besamim borei minei besamim Yai-dai, yada-da-da-dai, yai-dai, yada-da-da-dai, yada-dai, yada-dai, yada-dai. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh borei meorei ha'esh Yai-lai, yai-la-la-la-lai, yai-lai, yai-la-la-la-lai, yai-la-la-lai, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or lechoshech ben Yisrael le'amim ben yom hashvi'i l'sheshet yamei hamaseh Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lechol Yai-dai, yada-da-da-dai, yai-dai, yada-da-da-dai, yada-dai, 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 Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Bimheira ve'yameinu, Yavo eleinu, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi. Shavua Tov, 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 Shavua Tov. Good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase. A good week, a week of peace. May gladness reign and joy increase.
Shavua Tov, everyone. Chag
Shavua
Sameach.
Tov.
Very nice. All right, everybody can be seated. Max, do me a favor, if you wouldn't mind just flipping those switches back on, so we got
Kodesh
good light.
Kodesh.
Ben Kodesh LaKodesh, right.
Yeah.
Very good. So, boy, I hate keeping to make Max do all the work. But everybody, this is Max. He's amazing. He had his bar mitzvah not so long ago. Just a remarkable guy. Max, can you do me one other favor? So, as I explained, moving into the new building, we can't find our printed Megillas anywhere. So, if you wouldn't mind handing these out, there may not be enough for everybody exactly. What that is a QR code for those that are not familiar. If you take your phone out and follow the instructions, it will take you directly to an online version of the Megillah. So you can follow that way. And if you're really anti what I just said, I have 2 copies that you can also take a physical book. Neil, you want the physical book? I wasn't identifying you, but anybody who wants, we'll just put these here. Maybe this is the inspiration everybody needs to get their own copy for next year. We'll see. So first thing we're going to do is to offer the bracha, the blessing for the reading of the Megillah. And Cantor Kevin is going to do our heavy lifting tonight of our chanting. And as I said, we're going to do a little bit of a balance of everything. We're going to chant a little bit. We're going to summarize a little bit. We're going to read a little bit. And we're going to think a little bit. And we'll put this here to make it a little bit easier so that we can see exactly what it is.
Perfect.
Now, for those that aren't familiar with this, there are 5 Megillot, 5 scrolls. Some of them we are more familiar with than others. And I'm not mistaken, each of them has a melody of their own, mostly variations of some core similarities. And as Cantor Kevin will explain, in some cases, very few cases, we actually dip into a totally different melody from a very different standpoint. You want to explain 2 seconds what that means?
Sure. So in the Megillat Esther, there are certain places that are not the happiest of moments, and that are kind of reminding us of the destruction of the temple. And as there's a trope called Megillat Eicha trope, which is a very sad sounding trope. So there are certain moments throughout the Megillah which bring out the kind of that sad trope. And so you might hear, I think, 1, maybe 2 moments where I'll really slow it down, and you'll hear the entire tone switch from this a little bit, somewhat of a mix of happy and sad to kind of this sad sound. So you hear that once at the beginning, and then I think another moment as well.
All right. So, Cantor, you're going to offer our blessing first,
Yep.
and then we're going to get started with the first 12 verses of the first chapter. And Cantor Kevin's going to read from his. I'm going to follow along in our official Megillah here. And Cantor, take it away.
Fabulous. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al mikra Megillah.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim la'avoteinu bayamim hahem Bazman hazeh.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehecheyanu v'kiyemanu v'higianu lazman hazeh.
So before Kevin begins, if anybody's having trouble using the thing I just made, the QR code, you can also just type into Google Book of Esther, and chances are you're going to find something just fine. So
Yes, Sfaria is a great
Yes,
website.
Sfaria is a good
I
version.
highly recommend it.
yes. All right, Cantor, we'll follow you.
ויהי בימי אחשוורוש, הוא אחשוורוש, המולך מהודו ועד כוש, 27 ומאה מדינה. בימים ההם כשבט המלך אחשוורוש על כיסא מלכות אשר בשושן הבירה בשנת 3 למלכו עשה משתה לכל שריו ועבדיו חיל פרס ומדי הפרטמים ושרי המדינות לפניו בהראותו את עושר כבוד מלכותו ואת יקר תפארת גדולתו ימים רבים 80 ומעט יום ובמלאות הימים האלה עשה המלך לכל העם הנמצאים בשושן הבירה למגדול ועד קטן משתה 7 ימים בחצר גינת ביתן המלך חור כרפס ותכלת אחוז בחבלי בוץ וארגמן על גלי כסף ועמודי שש מיטות זהב וכסף על רצפת ושש ועדן וסוחרת והשקות בכלי זהב וכלים מכלים שונים ויין מלכות רב כיד המלך והשתייה כדת אין אונס כי כן יסד המלך על כל רב ביתו לעשות כרצון איש ואיש גם ושתי המלכה ועשתה משתי נשים בית המלכות אשר למלך אחשוורוש ביום השביעי כטוב לב המלך ביין אמר למהומן בזתה רבעונה בגתה ואבגדה זיתר וחרצב שבעת הסריסים המשרתים את פני המלך אחשוורוש להביא את ושתי המלכה לפני המלך בחדר מלכות להראות העמים והשרים את יופייה כי טובה מראה היא ותאמר המלכה ושתי לבוא בדבר המלך אשר ביד הסריסים וקצוף המלך מאוד וחמתו בערבו.
So as our story begins, we are introduced to King Ahasuerus, the most powerful person in the world at that time. And the beginnings of the story are a lavish 6-month celebration. 6 months, Neil, what do you think about that? Well, sounds good, right? 6 months of celebration in the 3rd year of the reign of Ahasuerus. Queen Vashti, his then queen, refuses the king's request to appear at the celebration and to display her beauty for the assembled guests. Our first heroine of the story, Vashti, refusing the king's request, which, just to be very clear, if you don't know what it means to refuse the king's request, okay, yes, generally speaking, does not go well. Vashti is, to this day, someone that we look up to and we admire for that strength and that courage. Ultimately, though, the king's advisors counsel that Vashti be replaced with a new queen. And as we turn to chapter 2, Cantor Kevin will read, you'll tell us which verses, and we'll pick up the story there.
Starting verse 5 through verse 11, and then skipping from 15 to 23. איש יהודי היה בשושן הבירה, ושמו מרדכי, בן יאיר, בן שמעי, בן קיש, איש ימינים. אשר הוגלה מירושלים, אם הוגלה אשר הוגלתה, היא מכוניה מלך יהודה, אשר הגלה נבוכדנצר מלך בבל. ויהי אומן את ההדסה, היא אסתר בת דודו, כי אין לך אב ואם, והנערה יפת תואר וטובת מראה, ובמות אביה ואימך לקחך מרדכי לא לבד, ויהי במהי שמע דבר המלך כבדתו, ובהי קבץ נערות רבות אל שושן הבירה, אל יד הגה, והתמחת אסתר אל בית המלך על יד הגה, שומר הנשים. ותיטב הנערה בעיניו, ותישא חסד לפניו, ויבהל את תמרוקה ואת מנותיה לתת לך, ואת 7 הנערות הראויות לתת לך מבית המלך, וישניה ואת נערותיה לטוב בית הנשים. לא הגיע אסתר את עמך ואת מולדתה, כי מרדכי ציווה עליה אשר לא תגיע. ובכל יום ויום מרדכי מתהלך לפני חצר בית הנשים, לדעת את שלום אסתר ומה יעשה בה. Skipping to verse 15. ובהגיע תום אסתר בת אביחיל דוד מרדכי, אשר לקח לו לבד לבוא אל המלך, לא וישתה דבר, כי אם את אשר יאמר הגיא סריס המלך שומר הנשים. ותהי אסתר נושאת חן בעיני כל רואיה. ותילקח אסתר אל המלך אחשוורוש אל בית מלכותו בחודש העשירי, הוא חודש טבת, בשנת 7 למלכות. ויאהב המלך את אסתר מכל הנשים, ותישא חן וחסד וטובה מכל הבחורות, וישם כתר מלכות בראשה, וימליכיה תחת ושתי. ויעש המלך משתה גדול לכל שריו ועבדיו, את משתה אסתר, והנחה למדינות עשה, ותיתן משאת כיד המלך. ובהיקבץ בתולות שנית, ומרדכי יושב בשער המלך מלך. אין אסתר מגדת מולדתה ואת עמה, כאשר ציווה לה מרדכי, ואת מעמד מרדכי אסתר עשה, כאשר הייתה ואומנה אותו. בימים ההם ומרדכי יושב בשער המלך קצף בגתן ותרש, ושני סריסי המלך משמרי הסף, וישו למלך יד לשלוח יד במלך אחשוורוש. וידע הדבר למרדכי, ויגע לאסתר המלכה, ותאמר אסתר למלך בשם מרדכי. ויבקש הדבר, וימצא, וילד שניהם על עץ, וייכתב בספר דברי הימים לפני המלך.
So, as we just heard in chapter 2, across the Persian Empire, officials are appointed to identify candidates to succeed Vashti as queen. A young Jewish girl by the name of Esther, or actually Hadassah, the niece of Mordecai, is brought to the capital of Persia as one of the candidates. Mordecai, however, tells her to conceal her identity, to not let them know that she is a Jew. Esther is chosen from amongst all the candidates and is raised to queen. As the chapter ends, Mordecai happens to learn of a plot to overthrow the king. Mordecai informs Esther. Esther tells the king, and the two men who were plotting that assassination are arrested and executed. Now, importantly for later in the story, all of this is recorded in the annals of the king, but not yet in the king's knowledge of what just took place. And with that, we'll turn to chapter 3 and the first few verses. Now, this is the first time in which a major character, I believe, is going to make their appearance. Everybody have a grogger handy? Good. If you don't have a grogger handy, we have plenty of them. You need to have one. So when we get to that person's name, we're going to grog away until the rabbi waves us off a little. Sound good? That a good plan? All right, let's make sure everybody got their groggers. We got plenty in the back there. All right, let's test it out once. Haman. Boo! All right, we'll warm up. I think we'll have to rely on our pirates in the back over there.
Yeah.
They'll help us out. Chapter 3.
First 6 verses.
First 6 verses.
אחר הדברים האלה גידל המלך אחשוורוש את המן. בן המדתה האגגי וינשאהו ויישם את כיסאו מעל כל שרים אשר איתו וכל עבדי המלך אשר בשער המלך קוראים ומשתחווים להמן. כי כן ציווה לו המלך ומרדכי לא יכרע ולא ישתחווה ויאמרו עבדי המלך אשר בשער המלך למרדכי מדוע אתה עובד את מצוות המלך ויהי כאומרם אליו יום ויום ולא שמע עליהם ויגידו להמן. לראות היעמדו דברי מרדכי כי הגיד להם אשר הוא יהודי וירא המן. כי אין מרדכי קורא ומשתחווה לו וימלא המן. אימה ויבז בעיניו לשלוח יד במרדכי לבדו כי הגידו לו את העם מרדכי ויבקש המן להשמיד את כל היהודים אשר בכל מלכות אחשוורוש עם מרדכי.
So we're going to boo Haman in English just like we boo him in Hebrew. So I hope you're ready. Achashverosh, our king, sadly appoints Haman boo! To be his prime minister. And all bow in homage to Haman, save for one. Boo! One stands against the tide, Mordecai, consistently, constantly, in every opportunity, refuses to bow to Haman. Boo! And so an enraged Haman, boo! Vows to kill all the Jews of Persia. Haman, boo! Exactly right. Prevails upon Achashverosh to destroy the Jews. And then a royal edict is disseminated throughout Persia. The 13th of Adar is designated as the date to exterminate all the Jews and to plunder their possessions. As we begin chapter 4, and whatever verses Cantor Kevin tells us we're...
First 3 verses. ומרדכי ידע את כל אשר נעשה ויקרא מרדכי את בגדיו, וילבש שק ואפר, ויצא בתוך העיר, ויזעק זעקה גדולה ומרה, ויבוא עד לפני שער המלך, כי אין לבוא אל שער המלך בלבוש שק. בכל מדינה ומדינה, מקום אשר דבר המלך ודתו מגיע. אבל גדול ליהודים, וצום וכי ומספד, שק ואפר יצאו על הרבים.
And so, in chapter 4, Esther's mission becomes clear. Mordecai tears his clothes and puts on sackcloth and ashes as a sign of public mourning. For those of you that may have experienced mourning yourself, you may know the tradition of kriya, of tearing what is most of these days a ribbon, but was really meant to be your clothing. This is because this was the common funeral practice, the common grieving practice in ancient times. And so his doing this is really recognition of the fact that the status of the Jewish people at that point is on, quite literally, a knife's edge. So he tears his clothes, he puts on sackcloth and ashes, and he does this as a sign to everyone else to understand the gravity of what is going on. He sends a copy of the decree to Esther, who he knows most likely has not seen it because she is living then in the palace, and of course begs her to intercede with the king. But Esther replies and explains, to approach the king without being summoned is to, in effect, risk death. Mordecai explains, however, that there is no choice. It must be done. So Esther, rather than acting rashly, asks Mordecai to go back to the Jews and to the community and says to them to fast and to pray for 3 days before that she will approach the king, asking really, in effect, for a certain amount of divine providence. But as we will remind you, throughout the book of Esther, you will not find any overt reference to God, not once, not anywhere. It is the one book in the entire Tanakh in which that is the case. However, when one reads carefully and understands that while God the character may not be present, God is most certainly present in the hearts and the minds of the people in their darkest hours. So as we turn to chapter 5 and chapter 6, we're going to turn to our English language. Cantor Kevin gets a little bit of a much-deserved break, and I will read. On the third day, Esther put on royal apparel and stood in the inner court of the king's palace, facing the king's palace while the king was sitting on his royal throne in the throne room facing the entrance of the palace. In case you're not sure, it's facing towards the entrance of the palace because they need to repeat it 6 times. As soon as the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won his favor. The king extended to Esther the golden scepter which he had in his hand, and Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. "What troubles you, Queen Esther?" the king asked her. "What is your request? Even to half the kingdom it shall be granted you." "If it please your majesty," Esther replied, "let your majesty and Haman come today to the feast that I have prepared for him." We're going to see the wisdom again of our heroine Esther. The king commanded, "Tell Haman to hurry and do Esther's bidding." And so the king and Haman came to the feast that Esther had prepared. At the wine feast, the king asked Esther, "What is your wish? It shall be granted you. And what is your request? Even to half the kingdom it shall be fulfilled." "My wish," replied Esther, "my request. If your majesty will do me the favor, if it please your majesty, to grant my wish and accede to my request, let your majesty and Haman come to the feast I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do your majesty's bidding." That day, Haman went out happy and lighthearted. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the palace gates, and Mordecai did not rise or even stir on his account, Haman was filled with rage at him. Nevertheless, Haman controlled himself and went home. He sent for his friends and his wife Zeresh, and Haman told them about his great wealth and his many sons, and all about how the king had promoted him and advanced him above the officials and the king's courtiers. What is more, said Haman, Queen Esther gave a feast, and beside the king, she did not have anyone but me. And tomorrow, too, I am invited by her along with the king. Yet, all this means nothing to me. Every time I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the palace gate. And then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, let a stake be put up, 50 cubits high, and in the morning ask the king to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then you can go gaily with the king to the feast. The proposal pleased Haman. Boo!
Boo.
Boo is right. And he had the stake put up. That night, sleep deserted the king, and he ordered the book of records, which you may remember from the beginning of the story, the annals, to be brought. And it was read to the king. There it was found written that Mordecai had denounced Bigtan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, who had plotted to do away with King Ahasuerus. What honor or advancement has been conferred on Mordecai for this? The king inquired. Nothing at all has been done for him, replied the king's servants, who were in attendance of him. Who is in the court? The king asked. For Haman had just entered the outer court of the royal palace to speak to the king about having Mordecai impaled on the stake he had prepared for him. It is Haman. Standing in the court, the king's servants answered him. Let him enter, said the king. Haman entered. And the king asked him, what should be done for men whom the king desires to honor? Now Haman says to himself, whom would the king desire to honor more than me? So Haman, said to the king, for the man whom the king desires to honor, let royal guard which the king has worn be brought, and a horse on which the king has ridden, and on whose head a royal diadem has been set, and let the attire and the horse be put in the charge of one of the king's noble courtiers, and let the man whom the king desires to honor be attired and paraded on the horse throughout the city square, while they proclaim before him, this is what is done for the man whom the king desires to honor. Quick then, said the king to Haman, get the guard and the horse, as you have said, and do this to Mordecai the Jew, who sits in the king's gate. Omit nothing of all you have proposed. Are we clear on what's been happening here? Right? This is the beauty of hafochba, right? Things turning on the opposite side of what it seemed they might be. And so Haman took the garb and the horse and arrayed Mordecai and paraded him through the city square and proclaimed before him, this is what is done for the man whom the king desires to honor. And then Mordecai, whom returned to the king's gate, while Haman hurried home, his head covered in mourning. There Haman told his wife Zeresh, Zeresh also, and all his friends everything that had befallen him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, if Mordecai before whom you have begun to fall is of Jewish stock, you will not overcome him. You will fall before him to your ruin. And while they were still speaking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurriedly brought Haman to the banquet which Esther had prepared. As we turn back to Cantor Kevin and to chapter 7, a reversal of fortune is in the air.
ויבוא המלך והמן לשתות עם אסתר המלכה. ויאמר המלך לאסתר גם ביום השני במשתה היין, מה שאלתך אסתר המלכה ויינתן לך, ומה בקשתך עד חצי המלכות ותעש. ותען אסתר המלכה ותאמר, אם מצאתי חן בעיניך והמלך, ואם על המלך טוב, ותינתן לי נפשי בשאלתי, ועמי בבקשתי, כי נמכרנו אני ועמי להשמיד ולהרוג ולאבד, ואילו לעבדי ולשפחות נמכרנו, החרשתי, כי אין חציר שווה בנזק המלך. ויאמר המלך אחשוורוש, ויאמר לאסתר המלכה, מי הוא זה ואיזה הוא אשר מלאו ליבו לעשות כן? ותאמר אסתר, איש צר אויב המן, הרע הזה, והמן נבעט מלפני המלך והמלכה. והמלך קם בחמתו במשתה היין אל גינת הבית, והמן עמד לבקש על נפשו מאסתר המלכה, כי ראה כי חלתה אליו הרעה מאת המלך. והמלך שב מגינת הביתן אל בית משתה היין, והמן נופל על המיטה אשר אסתר עליה. ויאמר המלך, גם לכבוש את המלכה אמי בבית. הדבר יצא מפי המלך ומפני המן חפו. ויאמר חרבונה אחד מן הסריסים לפני המלך, גם הנה העץ אשר עשה המן למרדכי אשר דיבר טוב אל המלך עומד בבית המן. גבוה 50 אמה, ויאמר המלך תלוהו עליו, ויתלו את המן על העץ אשר הכיל למרדכי, וחמת המלך שככה.
And so in chapter 7, at this second banquet, Esther finally reveals her identity and announces that she and her people are about to be murdered. Esther identifies Haman as the archenemy, as the plotter, and ultimately the king decides that Haman is to be hung especially on the gallows that had been prepared for Mordecai. And now, just to skip a little bit into chapter 8, as this ultimately unfolds, Mordecai is not only saved, he is named prime minister to replace Haman. As the king remembers, and a second royal edict is sent out, which empowers the Jewish communities throughout the Persian Empire, which at this point is gigantic, to gather themselves, to arm themselves, and to prepare, should anyone attempt to kill them, that they are permitted to fight in self-defense. And so, at the end of chapter 8, the people ultimately are ready and prepared. And as we begin in chapter 9, and Cantor, you'll explain what you're doing in chapter 9, the moment has finally fallen. So,
there will be one moment that we talk about all the 10 sons of Haman, and it's tradition to do it all in one breath. So we'll see if I get through it, but I think we'll be fine. וב12 חודש הוא חודש אדר, ב13 יום בו אשר הגיע דבר המלך ודתו להיעשות ביום אשר סיברו אויבי היהודים לשלוט בהם, ונהפוך הוא אשר ישלטו היהודים המה בשונאיהם. נקהלו היהודים בעריהם בכל מדינות המלך אחשוורוש לשלוח יד במבקשי רעתם, ואיש לא עמד לי בפניהם, כי נפל פחדם על כל העמים, וכל שרי המדינות החשתרפנים והפחות ועושי המלאכה אשר למלך מנשאים את היהודים, כי נפל פחד מרדכי עליהם, כי גדול מרדכי בבית המלך, ושמעו הולך בכל המדינות, כי האיש מרדכי הולך וגדול. ויכו היהודים בכל אויביהם מכת חרב וחרד ואבדן, ויעש בשונאיהם כרצונם. ובשושן הבירה הרגו היהודים ואבד 500 איש, ואת פרשנדרתה ואת אלפון ואת אספתה ואת פורתה ואת הדליה ואת ארידתה ואת פרמשתה ואת אריסאי ואת ארידאי ואת איזתה 10.
Big Megillah.
בני המן בן המדת הצורר היהודים הרגו, ובביזה לא שטחו את ידם ביום ההוא. במספר ההרוגים בשושן הבירה לפני המלך, ויאמר המלך לאסתר המלכה, בשושן הבירה הרגו היהודים ואבד 500 איש, ואת 10 בני המן. בשאר מדינת המלך מה עשו, ומה שאלתך ויינתן לך, ומה בקשתך עוד ותעש. ותאמר אסתר אם על המלך טוב, ויינתן גם מחר ליהודים אשר בשושן לעשות כדת היום, ואת 10 בני המן. ויתלו על העץ, ויאמר המלך להיעשות כן, ותינתן דת בשושן, ואת 10 בני המן. תלו ויקהלו היהודים אשר בשושן גם ביום 14 לחודש אדר, ויהרגו בשושן 300 איש, ובביזה לא שטחו את ידם. ושאר היהודים אשר במדינות המלך נקהלו ועמוד על נפשם, ונוח מאויביהם והרוג בשונאיהם 75,000, ובביזה לא שלחו את ידם. ביום 13 לחודש אדר, ונוח ב14 בו, ועשו אותו יום משתה ושמחה. והיהודים אשר בשושן נקהלו ב13 בו וב14 בו, ונוח ב15 בו, ועשו אותו יום משתה ושמחה. על כן היהודים הפרזים היושבים באורי הפרזות עושים את יום 14 לחודש אדר שמחה ומשתה ויום טוב, משלוח מנות איש לרעהו. ויכתוב מרדכי את הדברים האלה, וישלח ספרים אל כל היהודים אשר בכל המדינות המלך אחשוורוש, וקרובים הקרובים והרחוקים, לקיים עליהם להיות עושים את יום 14 לחודש אדר ואת יום 15 בו בכל שנה ושנה, כימים אשר ינוח בהם היהודים מאויביהם, והחודש אשר ניפח ליהודים מיגון לשמחה ומאבל ליום טוב לעשות אותם ימי משתלש ושמחה ומשלוח מנות איש לרעהו ומחנות לאביונים. וקיבל היהודים את אשר אחרת לעשות ואת אשר כתב מרדכי עליהם, כי המן בן המדתה האגגי צורר כל היהודים, חשב על היהודים לאבדם, והפיל פור הוא הגורל להומן ולאבדם. ובבואך לפני המלך אמר אל הספר, ישוב מחשבותו הרעה אשר חשב על היהודים על ראשו, ותלו אותו את פניו על העץ. על כן קראו לימי האלה פורים על שם הפור. על כן על כל דברי האיגרת הזאת ומה ראו על ככה ומה הגיע עליהם, קיימו וקיבלו היהודים עליהם ועל זרעם ועל כל הנביאים עליהם, ולא יעבור להיות עושים את שני היהודים הימים האלה ככתבם וכזמנם בכל שנה ושנה. הימים האלה נזכרנו ואנסים בכל דור ודור, משפחה ומשפחה, מדינה ומדינה, ועיר ועיר, וימי הפורים האלה לא יעברו מתוך היהודים, וזרים לא יסוף מזערם. ותכתוב אסתר המלכה בת אביחיל מרדכי היהודי את כל תוקף לקיים את איגרת הפורים הזאת השנית, וישלח ספרים אל כל יהודים, אל 27 מדינה מלכות אחשוורוש, דברי שלום ואמת, לקיים את ימי הפורים האלה בזמניהם, כאשר קיים עליהם מרדכי היהודי ואסתר המלכה, וכאשר קיימו על נפשם על זרעם דברי הצומות וזעקתם. ומאמר אסתר קיים דברי הפורים האלה ונכתב בספר.
So I'll summarize to conclude in chapter 9 and chapter 10. On the 13th day of Adar, the day that had been designated for Jewish destruction, the Jews are victorious over their enemies. The 10 sons of Haman are hung. The 14th and 15th of Adar designated to celebrate this salvation. These are the days of Purim. And in this moment, Mordechai initiates the 4 Purim practices that we to this day follow, 2 of which you will fulfill tonight. 1, to hear the Megillah. 2, to enjoy a festive meal. And we thank the Greenwald family very much for allowing us to have that meal this evening. And also, Matanot Le'Evyonim and Mishloach Manot, gifts that we send to each other as friends, and those that we prepare for those who are in need. So those last 2 you still can do. Those are mitzvahs that you can still fulfill. But the big one is being here tonight, and to hear the end of the story, which is that Mordechai again, who begins as just a nameless Jew in the crowd, Esther, again, who begins as the niece of Mordechai,